Hey everyone, it's the epistemologers again. I have a new microphone, so I don't sound like I'm in the middle of a tin can. If
Yes.
that's if that's an improvement, let us know. We have general talk about decentralization
Yeah.
coming up, and this is a many-faceted talk, a lot of different subtopics, different ways of leading into this, and a lot of different tangents that could be taken. I just wanted to start with the general, like high level overview of our take on decentralization and why that is something that's desirable from the standpoint of many different things, including finance, software, industry. Can you think of any others? I thought of some before.
Finance, software, industry, information, like not military intelligence, but information and the spread and
Yeah.
dissemination of information, and the research and figuring out of information. Generally,
Yeah, so
decentralization.
since we're software engineers,
Yeah,
I want to say because we're software engineers, we might slant it a little bit towards that angle, but the concept still applies to a lot of different things.
that's true.
And generally,
Well, and
generally, I think okay,
manufacturing as well has started to get into it. With decentralization of CAD files and 3D printing, although that's still kind of in its infancy. Uh, it's all over the place.
well, there's open source, which ties into it quite a bit, just because open source makes things accessible, which helps in the distribution of information. So open source has started in software, and um, the trend is, I want to say, and will be moving into hardware and other kinds of industry, because ultimately it's about distribution of information, making it accessible, making it understandable, so people can work with it in their lives and wherever. Take a problem and own it, solve it in front of them, and then share the solution, the knowledge that they were able to build. And this is the kind of thing we see all over the place in open source software, facilitated by a tool called Git.
Yeah.
Is the really common one.
Yep.
Um, and the model is very, very clean. It's just copy, solve, and share,
Yep.
basically. And this is something you can do with information really easily. It's a little harder to do in hardware because copying it costs resources. So acquiring the hardware,
Which is one of the things that's exciting about 3D printing, is that
right?
copying becomes immensely easier. It might be a little bit slower to iterate, but copying becomes immensely easier to have the exact same thing.
Yeah, but the concept is, or the methodology is pretty much the same. You're copying some piece of hardware, you address the problem, you figure out how to fix it, and then you get some piece of knowledge that you end up sharing back to the community for whoever wants to take advantage of your solution. And then they can take your baton and run with it in their direction. So you could have hundreds of different people or more.
Well, and it's not just one baton. They can take your copy of a baton and run it in their direction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, whichever direction they want.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then so you can have hundreds of people running in all different directions all at the same time with 100 different batons that all then come back to the original baton and make that thing super good. It's a terrible analogy.
Of it is, that's okay. You can see that the productivity of this thing, the efficacy of it, is really high. in the software industry and beyond, because all of the corporate titans of technology, Silicon Valley and all that, they built a mountain on top of their this huge of open source software.
Yeah, so they built
almost every is forced to use open source software because their competitors will.
Yes, and
it gives them a leg up. Everyone needs that base to stand on.
The competitive edge in software engineering is with open source software. You cannot. You are at a disadvantage if you try to do everything yourself.
Yeah. So you start with the open source software, and then you use your own resources. You're investing in work that is made to a thin layer on top of that open source mountain.
Yep.
And that's your proprietary work that you try to sell as a product or service or something. And that's kind of rinse and repeated many times over throughout the industry.
And then each of those things, there's a potential that somebody might find a problem within that mountain of work, and they might make a new solution on top of that to add to the mountain and make it better, make it denser, or make it bigger.
Yeah, so for the QAnon community, there's a bunch of these different QAnon post aggregation websites that have cropped up.
Yeah.
They're all clones for the most part. Some of them offer slightly different features than another, but they're all open source. People can grab it. People can just throw it up on some host somewhere. And there's a bunch of them. They're at various domains, and there's probably going to be more as we go along. And this is really just decentralization in action. Just being able to watch the spread of these cloned websites everywhere. When GitHub brought down the host for, I think it was QAnon.pub, or something like that, when they brought down the host, they just ended up redirecting that to QAnon.app, which was put up on a different host, and there wasn't really an issue with it. But hosting is a situation that is highly centralized at the moment.
Yes, it is. And it's a major problem. The internet, as it was originally designed, was supposed to be very decentralized in case the original goal of the internet was to continue to have comms in case of a nuclear attack on a major city. So to have comms from New York to LA if Chicago was taken out. And with the telephone lines, that might have been, very difficult, next to impossible. But with computer science, they were able to find a method of routing through and being able to route around Chicago, even through a smaller node.
Yeah.
So it was
so even the web.
It was decentralized.
Even the web it started more federalized, and then it became. The deep state, or lack for a better word, they have a lot of money. You can imagine.
The government has a lot of money.
Yeah. We'll not talk about the government, though, because they're very different things.
That's true.
But they have... Think about the bankers, basically, up the chain.
Yeah.
All the way at the top, you got deep state financiers, and they can make money out of thin air and just pay whoever they want, whatever number they want.
Well, people remember when fiber came through, right? And when people were going to do broadband connections, a lot of towns signed over the right to have their bidding rights in order to have a monopoly for the Comcast or whatever to come in and say, we own all of the infrastructure here because we bought and paid for it. And the town's like, hey, it's a free broadband. We're going to get broadband. Yay. And we don't have to pay for it.
So the telecoms really got an influx of money in order to conquer the wires everywhere. They wanted to own all the rights to all the wires and build out new wiring.
Connect
basically
everybody.
Making pipes, everything. They fashioned it into hubs around these internet backbones, or so-called.
Yep.
Which are taking the federalization of the web and centralizing it around their own servers, their own network hardware.
Right.
So this had an effect of making us dependent on the telecoms. And at the time, this was not received too well. And I think it's still kind of sore spot. But this is where the net neutrality thing came from. Is, we don't want the telecoms dictating what goes over the pipes.
Yeah.
But the problem with it right now is that it handed over all of the responsibility to Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley has received a lot of deep state money in the same way the telecoms have, in order to control it using virtual pipes. And we're now in the midst of a big censorship purge and banning spree, which is basically the two sides of the coin they wanted you to choose between. But both were bad options. It was a bad coin.
Yeah. Yeah, for those not following the deep state, we're talking about, there are like things like the Snowden documents and things that lay out, in this particular case, talking about intelligence agencies wanting to get personal data and run dragnets on personal data. And to get a good understanding of what we mean by that, for dragnets, what they're doing is they're going to look through everything that you ever say. In fact, there's a wonderful thing, Google's audio, they spent a lot of money and a lot of time perfecting audio listening technology. That when you talk to Siri, what happens is that audio clip is played and an algorithm runs through that and parses what you say into words, into actual English words. And so if you can do that, you can take any audio recording and get a parsing of what they say into words, and then run algorithms over those words to, say, find the word terrorist, or find the word CIA, or find the word, a specific set of keywords. And then they can look over each set of keywords, and they don't even have to identify you. They can say, this subject, 8139, we don't know who he is, but this guy has according to our statistical model, has a 90% chance of becoming a terrorist. We might want to put a thing, and they ship it off to a FISA court, and they get a warrant, and they open it up, and they follow this person because they have, statistical chances of being X, Y, or Z. And all of this is funded. All of this is not funded. All of this is brought to us by the Silicon Valley large group people. Because it's been,
a lot of these companies have contracts.
Because it's
like the CIA.
Like Facebook, Google, Amazon, a lot of companies have things, and they've been working on software to better identify you or anyone as for advertisers, which is a great benefit to them and of interest. And then that's also that sort of targeting, that sort of understanding of who you are is also of great interest to spy agencies or internal homeland defense agencies. Of course, why wouldn't it be?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, they want to build a profile on everyone.
Yeah. Of course they do.
What better way to do it than to have a public company sell you a product that's basically a surveillance device, and you just set it up in your home and you just start talking and it ambiently collects what you say.
Yeah, Amazon Echo. Yes. Or Alexa. Was it Alexa? It's
Alexa.
Yeah.
Well, the Echo is the device. Alexa's the voice. The AI.
And it's pretty prevalent.
Personality.
Like any voice assistant, any application is capable of possibly listening to you, right? Like Facebook they just got caught with having their app listen to having the microphone active all the time.
Well, for a while there, I thought I was tripping because we'd be talking about something, and my wife would have some content come up in her feed that was that was coincidentally based on what we were talking about, and I think that just kept happening to the and we just caught the pattern. We're like, this is interesting.
Yeah,
this is interesting.
It is interesting, and from a computer science standpoint, it isn't impossible to run this, right? It isn't impossible to run tags and try to figure out conversations and even
it's really easy.
Yeah, computers are good at looking at large amounts of data, parsing through them, and then categorizing them. That's kind of the,
Yeah, and all the conditions were right for the business to take the action to do that as well.
Oh yeah,
for advertising reasons, ostensibly.
And
also
even if
anybody else that wants to have contracts with them,
even if it was legitimately for advertising reasons, of course, it would be foolish to believe our government would not try to use any available resource to it, right? If its job is to protect U.S. citizens from terrorist attacks, isn't it important to try to find the terrorists before they commit the attack? So then at that point, it's justified, at least to the agency. And that's why it's important that we make it clear that that's not justified and that's against the will of the people, that the government should not be doing those things.
The CIA has this investment capital wing called InQtel that has contracts with all kinds of, or they've made investments in a lot of different companies.
Yeah.
One of which is called Docker, which is a containerization software.
Did they own Docker?
They don't own it. They have I think it's a support contract with Docker, which could easily be masking something else.
Right.
But what they could do is work with Docker to produce exploits in the containerization software so that they can run their own surveillance software or anything else. There's some suspicious stories around systemd, which is a Debian based
release
process. It's an architecture process that controls a lot of the launching and stopping of other processes.
Yep. It's run on startup for Linux.
And there's this really suspicious story around the death of the guy who made Debian, Linux, that people can go look for. I think his name was Yin. Yeah.
And then then don't forget there's the AES or the encryption when the NSA put in encryption a mod to the encryption the way that what's it? Do you remember that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I remember a bit of a project to weaken the encryption algorithm in some way that made it easier for their cracking hardware to basically decrypt or find the keys for an encrypted block. And these things, there are many, many different examples of these things. We have look at Amazon.
The computer science field is filled with these kinds of stories of sort
intrigue
of it's a little crazy. It's a little fun, and it's totally like for instance, if you want to have an application on the Apple Store, and also just in general, if you want to legally have an application with encryption, you have to register with the United States government because encryption is seen as a form of weaponry. Like you have to register your application with the government. That's
cyber war.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Cyber weapon.
Yeah,
so I wanted to get back to Amazon because they have pretty well-known contracts with the CIA. CEO, and I think he's majority shareholder, Jeff Bezos,
Yeah.
has a pretty well-known or well-documented, I should say, relationship with the CIA. He's got ownership of the Washington Post, which is basically another mouthpiece for the CIA. Amazon Web Services is, I think, the most popular hosting.
Yeah, it's almost the only hosting.
Platform.
It's so popular.
Pretty much. It's defining what the cloud is
Itself. Yeah.
almost single-handedly.
Yeah.
And the cloud is really just marketing term for servers that
exist.
These big corporations own, basically.
Yeah,
it didn't need to go that way. It didn't need to be centralized, and I wanted to stress that because Western Digital has a product called MyCloud, which actually is a product you buy, set it up in your house, and it has, or it tries to be, your own personal cloud.
That we are not sponsored by Western Digital.
I'm not sponsored by Western Digital. I just say it because I know about it.
I'm just joking.
Yeah. But no, I know about it, and I think there are others out there.
The Interplanetary File System, IPFS, is another really interesting decentralized concept, and that's what that is and there's a lot of things that run IPFS, which is...
Yeah, there's a big list, but there's a couple that I know names that I recognize.
Yeah, like DTube. Yeah.
And what was the other one that... there was another one that I recognized.
There's a few of them.
I don't remember what it was.
But it runs a decentralized, essentially...
Peer-to-peer.
Peer-to-peer. It's a layer over...
Content delivery, isn't it?
Yeah, HTTP. It's a layer over the networking protocols, and it allows for you to have websites hosted peer-to-peer rather than distributed only between a server and its client. So every server, every node in it is both a server and a client, which is really cool.
It's really cool. It stands to change how the web works.
Yeah, if it gets
been
popular.
Going for a few years, people are really getting into it because decentralization is getting hot right now.
Well, and they did it smart because it allows you to access a site regular HTTP style, but it will still run its own internal protocols with your stuff. So that's why DTube can work, is because even though it's accessible through HTTP, which is its own protocol, it can still run on top of HTTP, and it still works, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That's really smart for adoption.
They wrote it in JavaScript, so they're able to send a node out to your browser just down the wire, and you're running a peer-to-peer node right in your browser, and you don't even know it when you go to DTube.
It's so cool.
And that's just really cool to people like us.
Yeah, to nerds like us.
Yeah, it does. It handles streaming clearly.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. So look, if you're into that, look into IPFS.
IPFS is really cool. Yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you guys, please comment, like, and subscribe. We always appreciate every single subscriber, and we appreciate
we always have
pretty much any
have
action.
This awkward closing.
Yeah,
thing
well, we just well, come on, we gotta.
Someday it'll get better.
Yeah, sometimes I'm listening to somebody and they say like and subscribe, and sometimes I'm like, you know what, I should like this person. I usually
what
unsubscribe
I like the
to them.
best is give us your 2 cents, basically.
Well, yeah, I like that
care
one. Yeah, comment
what your 2 cents are. You just chip in.
Oh, we'll like any of them. Even people who say we are awful and we suck. We still appreciate you.